Welcome, everybody. We are live on X, Facebook, YouTube, and on EFI's accounts and our personal accounts. We welcome you back this morning or this afternoon, I guess, on the East Coast. It's morning for me, and but I'm happy to celebrate
breakfast with the EFI out on the West Coast.
That's right.
Lunch on the East Coast.
I celebrate lunch any time of day, so I'll celebrate with all you folks on the East Coast. So welcome back, and our guest today is Matt Ladner. He'll be a repeat guest, by the way. Dr. Ladner has our main dish, but I'm going to start us off with our appetizer this morning. Patriotism is unpatriotic. I saw two tweets this morning go out on X. The first one I noticed was by Chris Rufo, and he quote tweeted somebody that had this graph from Gallup. And just two below that, maybe even the next tweet in my feed, was by our friend Dr. Schultz out of Florida. And I'll talk about his tweet here in a second that's along these same lines. But Chris's tweet where he posted this basically just called attention to the graph and said, we need to do something about this. But I'm going to just explain this really quickly. So Gallup has run this poll every year for the past, at least 20 or so years, 25 years. And it says, how proud are you to be an American? Extremely proud, very proud, moderately proud, only a little proud, or not at all proud. And these data points from 2001 to 2025, this year, are the percentage who are extremely proud or very proud. And you can see on the graph, the red line is Republican, dotted line is independent, and blue is Democrat. In 2001, everyone was within 10 points of it, actually within 6 points of each other, from Republican, independent, and Democrat. Today, 24 years later, Republicans have kind of gone up and down, but not much. They've actually up 2 points over those 25 years. Independents have dropped from 84 to 53%, and Democrats have the largest decline or movement at all in any direction, and that's from 87 to 36. So I thought this was interesting just to look at visually, if nothing else. And you can see some wild swings here from year to year.
I mean, it's the idea of loyal opposition. Can you love your country even if you don't like the current president? Sort of that going on here, but there's also kind of a secular trend too.
Yep, that's right. And that, I think, is a good, on that point, the trend, the secular trend, might be best outlined here with the independent trend line. We can look at that because they're at least nominally independent. On the Democrat side, though, these swings in 2020 to 2021, it looks like, that next year. Yeah, that's the next year. And then 24 to 25. These are wild swings up and down. And even 24 to 25 was huge. They were over 60%, and now they're below 40%.
They love their country when Biden was president, but they hate their country when Trump is president, as if who is president is the same thing as who is the country.
That's right.
I don't know. For my civics class, I thought that we learned that presidents come and go, and that the country is bigger than that.
But that's just not the case.
My civics class was wrong.
You were mistaken. Your professor was mistaken. So then, just by chance, James Schultz shows up 2 tweets later, 2 posts later on X, with this graph. And teachers, this is a graph from EdChoice.
Education Next. It's an article in Education Next.
Yes, so it's an article. You're right, and this graph came from that article. The data came from an opinion tracking survey from EdChoice and a Morning Consult.
Right.
And so what this shows is that educators are more likely than parents and citizens generally to say it's important to portray the U.S. favorably. Now,
actually, the more striking thing is how clumped together they are. I mean, they're really kind of very close to each other, right? That's what, rather than see the difference between 62 and 59 as a meaningful difference. And how similar they are.
And yes, exactly. So what I wanted to kind of point out here, the difference between these two graphs is, one, if you dig a little bit deeper on this and in just one direction and look at this, and we go back to this graph, we say, okay, well, how can we look at the difference between 92 on the Republican side and 36 on the Democrat side, and throw in the independents at 53? If we kind of clump all those together and create some kind of ballpark average, can we get here? And my guess is, well, yeah, probably, most likely. And this goes back to research that you've done recently in the past year or two. You and James did some research. Jay, do you want to just...
Sure. James, Paul, and I think it was like 2-3 years ago for Heritage Foundation, had a national sample of teachers. And we found that on a variety of kind of hot button issues, teachers were fairly centrist in their views. They were always like a little bit to the left of the population average. But they weren't they weren't where the median Democrat was or the median Republican was. They were just a little bit left of center on just about every issue. And, we took this as encouraging news, which is that radicalism in our schools is not being driven by teachers. Teachers are largely drawn from the BA holding population that grew up within 50 miles of where the school is. That's the normal teacher. So they're reflective of the BA holders in their communities. And so they reflect the broad diversity of our country pretty well. They're not radicals, despite the libs of TikTok people that we do see. Those people are radicals, but those are not typical. And that's encouraging. That means that reform is possible, that we could recapture our schools, make their values better aligned with our schools. And the problem is not primarily driven by the teachers, but is primarily driven by policymakers.
Yep.
And radicals who've captured those schools for their purposes. But we can capture them back. And I take this as encouraging. And I see it as encouraging that, you still have this kind of consistent 90% plus patriotism among Republicans. Also important to note that over time, the share of people who are Republicans and Democrats is not fixed. And actually, people identifying as Republicans has gone up. Who are registered as Republicans has gone up. And that's encouraging too. So look, the parties, they're like competitive baseball teams, and they try to adopt postures and policies that will attract voters so they can win elections. And the Dems are having a rough time right now winning because they're adopting postures and policies that are out of sync with the median voter. And they'll have to move more to the center if they want to win in the future. And I suspect they eventually will, because they're a team who wants to win and they don't like losing over and over. And if they keep this up, they'll just keep losing for a while. So I think it's generally good news. I mean, that our political system works pretty well. The country is filled with a lot of sensible people who, when they detect radicalism hijacking their institutions, can be mobilized to take those institutions back. But we, have to forever be vigilant for people who want to hijack our institutions for their particular purposes.
Yeah, I I agree. And when you see these posts that show, these anecdotes, and they're real. I don't want to discount that. I mean, there are teachers in classrooms doing some crazy stuff, right? And there are school board members that are advocating for some crazy stuff. And we see those videos every day, and there are a lot of great people. They're calling that out and working to counter that. But I think it's important to note, just to your point, Jay, that when you get into the average classroom, the average teacher is kind of your average community member.
Right, although the policies could be radical and bad. So the teacher could be sensible, but the school could be crazy. Right. And so, we need school choice so you can escape the bad policies and also to help the teachers. But I think that, the good news is we should not despair, right? It's easy, when you pay attention to the stuff day after day, to begin to think, well, it's just hopeless. The country's lost, or education system is lost and captured by crazies, and there's nothing you can do about it. But we can do things about it, and we are doing things about it, and I'm hopeful for victory. And so there's a reason to exert the effort to do things like pass school choice programs and create new schools where those sensible teachers can relocate if the public schools that they work for are captured by crazies.
Right. Okay. Well, that was a big appetizer.
I'm feeling pretty full, but I'm still hungry for laughs.
Me too. We gotta let's go over to him and let's start that.
Some Texas barbecue.
I wish.
Some chewies.
That would be great. All right. Well, great. So our main dish today is a recent study that I authored for the Heritage Foundation called "From Weapons of Mass Deception to Meaningful Accountability," and I share Matt and Jay's optimism about how education can be better in the future. But basically, the point of this study is that we need to have new strategies to get there, and that our old strategies turned out to have a low ceiling, so to speak. So, Matt, if you go to the next slide, basically, the effort to hold schools sort of managerially accountable, which is most famously seen through the No Child Left Behind Act of the early 21st century, has basically broadly played out.
It's double secret probation? Is that what it is?
Double secret probation. Yeah. So, or as we said in the study, trophies for everyone, right? So, this chart is basically showing you the states that grade schools A through F based on their test scores. You'll notice that there's not as many of them as there used to be, and that these states are very prone to giving A's, which are in blue, and very, very, very reluctant to give an F, which is in red. You'll see the ratio there in the state of Florida, where the practice of A through F school grades originated. It looks like 1,102 A's awarded and 27 F's.
Is this because Florida schools are so great, Matt?
No, we actually do have external data from this in the form of the NAEP. And if you go to the next slide, Matt, I'll go ahead and pick on my home state of Arizona here. Now, mind you that this data, the NAEP data from 2024 showed that 49% of students, fourth graders in Arizona school districts in 2024 scored below basic in reading. Okay. And there's some argument in NAEP circles about whether proficient is too high a standard or not. I've never seen anyone debate that, below basic is inappropriate in any way. If you're below basic, you flat out can't read. Okay. So just keep that in mind. 49% of our school district students in Arizona scored below basic in reading. And yet this is the distribution of A's, A through F, right? I think we wound up getting 6 schools. That was on the previous slide. 6 schools statewide in Arizona got an F, right? Now this is actually showing you the comparison between great schools, how great schools rate schools, right? So great schools is a private platform, and it is not subject to all the corrupting politics that a state agency trying to rate state schools is subject to. And this is just for Maricopa County, so the Phoenix area. And as you can see, the grade schools now, this equation from grade schools rate schools 1 to 10, and the state of Arizona does it A through F. So I use my advanced math skills acquired in the Texas public school system between 1972 and 1986 to equate the 1 to 10 scale to 1 through 5 scale. So
you didn't learn that in grad school at the University of
Houston? I'm a professional. So yeah, as you can see, grade schools is not reluctant to hand out DNF grades to Phoenix area schools. The state of Arizona, however, is profoundly reluctant to give out DNF grades. Okay, you go to the next slide, Matt.
Okay.
On a reader request, I had someone request that I do a similar analysis for the state of Florida. Guess what? You find something pretty similar in Florida. All right. State of Florida is giving out 61% A's in the Miami area.
So can I channel my inner Mike Petrilli here? And
sure.
We just have to try harder. We just have to be tougher. Let's just do it better, right? Why is that not satisfying?
Well, we need to have smart grades, right? Like if we
smart grades, right?
I think my response to your Mike Petrilli imitation, Jay, would be that when we see the same thing happening over and over again, year after year, in state after state, it's telling us something, right? The political incentives involved in a state agency, slapping grades on state schools seem to work out in a similar fashion over and over again. And at some point, we have to basically say, why would we expect it to be any other way?
Well, let me ask you a question, though, Matt, about this. I mean, what if we put forward a concerted effort?
Try harder.
Yeah. I don't think the basic political realities of this are going to change, even if we quote try harder. And I will say this, but I think Mike Petrilli would actually agree to this. They tried really hard during No Trough Left Behind, right? The federal government really put an effort into this, and unfortunately, it didn't work out as well as we'd hoped, right?
The political punishment rises to a point where people can't keep that up, right? That's why the incentives undermined. For a little while, you might be tough. This may be a broader problem in the world of education. I mean, we're also seeing a new report out from Harvard on grade inflation and its causes and effects. But it's not even unique to Harvard. It's all over that universities are having a very
right. One of the things that parallels that we drew.
You're getting quiet.
The next slide, Matt.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah. So, Matt, if you go to the next slide, I shamelessly stole this history from our colleague Jason Bedrick, with citation, of course, right? But Jason, years ago, I think the state of New York having a state commission to certify food as kosher, right? And the long and the short of it is that it was a disaster, right? That people did not agree upon what, this is being the most basic problem, is that people didn't agree on what was kosher food and what wasn't kosher food. Strangely enough, politics very quickly became involved because what you wanted to do is have your stuff called kosher and the other stuff not called kosher, right? There was endless squabbles about this. There are contemporaneous observers who basically said that, in fact, there were things that were called kosher that should have never been called kosher under anyone's definition, and the opposite of that.
And the price of the whole thing went up.
Yeah, and so then eventually, I believe what happened was the court, quite wisely, in my view, eventually struck this state commission down.
Where the government can't be a certifier of what is kosher,
right,
by religious law.
It's essentially a religious function, to decide, what is kosher. So basically, now the state of New York's Kosher Commission has collapsed. Hell, horror! What will we do? How are we going to live without the state of New York to tell us what food is kosher and what food is not kosher? Okay, and basically, it worked out just fine. Private organizations that certified food is kosher. And if you know where to look, which I, as an Anglican, I did not know where to look until Jason told me, 10 years ago or something. But you look on that Cheerios box in the right spot, right, you'll find symbols like these that are from private organizations that certify food as kosher. Okay, now what's really the other great thing about this is it allows for diversity of preferences, right? You as an individual can decide to the degree to which you wish to keep kosher and look for the symbol that matches your preferences. Okay.
Because they're using different standards and different rules. So
yes,
you find the one that's consistent with your standards and rules.
right. And what is the possibility that everyone in the state of Montana, or fill in the blank here, all agree on, what constitutes a high quality school? I'm going to put that percentage at close to zero, right?
Yep.
We're a diverse country. We're a pluralistic country. We have a lot of differences of opinion. This private system of kosher certification actually allows that to live and breathe, rather than trying to come up with a one size fits all metric of, this is how it is, and this is how it's not. And so the conclusion of the study, if you go to the next slide, Matt, is that this is the future of accountability, right? The future of accountability looks like private organizations collecting reviews, right, as a resource to inform the decisions of parents. Only 19% of the service providers and vendors in the Arizona ESA program are private schools. Okay. And so when you start thinking beyond, just schools, right? Granny Smith's piano lessons, right? Granny Smith could be an ESA vendor, right? Is Granny Smith
as well as a tart apple?
Right. So the only human beings on the entire planet who know whether Granny Smith is any good at teaching piano lessons are the people that have taken her piano lessons, right? They're the only ones that can inform or possibly reliably inform the decisions of other people that are thinking about contracting with Granny Smith, right? So programs like this one, MASH is one of them, but there are other people working on these sorts of things. This is a huge advantage, by the way, that the great schools and the niche private platforms, not only do they give more reliable views of what the academics are in almost entirely public schools at this point, they also collect user reviews, and we know from research that was done by AEI that people actually really, really value user reviews, right? So the future of accountability is not, the sort of technocratic, top-down, low political ceiling sort of effort like we've seen in the past, but rather, it is going to more closely, in my view, follow the example of the kosher food example. We're in this weird spot if we want to kind of like draw out the kosher food example, where the private organizations have begun, but in K-12, the state kosher commission still exists, right? And it's been my observation that, at least here in Arizona, I believe that the vast majority of people making decisions about where to send their kids to school basically ignore the state A through F system, quite rationally so, by the way. And that to the extent that they want to gather information about academics, they're using platforms like Great Schools and Niche, right?
Right. So these private accountability organizations not only accommodate the diversity of preferences, but they also are able to uphold the standards of those preferences in the face of political opposition because they're not political organizations, right? It's a double whammy advantage, right, of both pluralistic and upholding standards.
Yes, it's a much easier task for the opponents of school accountability to take over a state rating agency one way or another than to somehow subvert Great Schools or Niche, because quite frankly, someone can always go and start a new Great Schools or Niche, and people are doing that, right? And if Diane Ravitch wants to create trophiesforeveryone.com, more power to her. Her ability to do that is protected by the First Amendment. I don't think anyone's going to pay much attention to it, but that's fine. But
what about the argument, though, that some people will make that, look, the stuff that these private accountability organizations can evaluate is not really the most important stuff. That the most important stuff is reading and math test scores, and this other stuff like, are parents happy, or do they think discipline is good? Those are nice, but they're not really the main thing. So how we suppose there's a role for the state here, the critic would say, because only the state can universally collect test scores.
I mean, there do need to be some test scores, but the fact of the matter is, I think we can, it's kind of painfully obvious that the state had their chance at this and they blew it, right? They don't reliably rate schools at all. They're giving trophies for everyone. Number one. Number two, if you happen to be some sort of like, tiger dad or mom, and the only thing you care about is maxing out your math scores or whatever, there's probably a rating out there for you somewhere, right? And this circles right back to the kosher example, right? Like, people should have the ability to choose what they think is important to them in choosing a school. And there is no right way to rate schools, right? No one's coming down from the mountain with stone tablets telling us exactly how to rate schools. We don't agree about this, right? And so there ought to be more private platforms. By the way, there are 300 plus kosher food rating agencies, and probably less than 10 school rating private platforms. So there probably ought to be more than there are now. But the states had their chance. They're not up to it.
That was a delicious main dish.
It was. We have just a minute. We have to let Dr. Ladner off to other commitments this morning. But Jay, did you want to?
Sure, I'll try to be quick. And Matt can run when he needs to run. But my dessert for today is Bill Gates has conveniently changed his mind. He used to be really worried about climate change, and he's still worried, but not as much. It's now manageable. And I'm not saying that he didn't have a legitimate change of mind, and that he isn't sincere in his reading of the evidence more carefully and balancing the interests in a different way than previously. But it is convenient that this also corresponds to a change in the role of high-tech industry. So it used to be that high-tech industry was the low energy consuming, clean industry in the service sector, competing to some extent for collective resources and regulatory political power with energy-consuming, dirty manufacturing. And so when the tech companies were the clean, low-energy consumers and manufacturing was the dirty, high-energy consumer, then the tech people were all over the climate change argument and funded organizations pushing climate change concerns and so on, because it didn't really affect their industry and affected manufacturing. But now with AI, the high-tech companies need giant server farms, which consume enormous amounts of energy. And for a little while, they thought, wind and solar will be enough, but it's not even close to what they're going to need to run those AI server farms to build our robot overlords of the future. So they've recognized that, we're going to have to consume a lot of energy and become the equivalent of the dirty manufacturing industry of the past because of their very high rate of energy consumption. And so this has facilitated Bill Gates in developing a more nuanced view that, we have to compete balancing interests, sure, we have to reduce emissions, but we also have to think about human poverty and welfare. Oh, and unsaid is, and AI will help fix all those things, so it is worth using all this energy for that, right? So now, again, I'm not saying he's disingenuous. I'm just saying that it is just a quirk of human beings that we are inclined to think that the good and true happen to coincide with our interests. And if our interests change, the good and true happen to change. It's just a funny thing to observe about Bill Gates and the rest of us. He's no more prone to this than all the rest of us. It's just funny when he does it, and less funny when I do it.
So so what's the saying? Who said there are no permanent friends and there are no permanent enemies? There are only permanent self-interests.
Yeah, it sounds like Clausewitz, but I don't know. We probably falsely attribute lots of things to Clausewitz. I thought you were going to go with the Mel Brooks. Maybe it's Mel Brooks who said that comedy is when you fall down a sewer. I'm sorry. Comedy is when you fall down a sewer. Tragedy is when I get a hangnail.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
So it's funny when Bill Gates does it.
But you're right, though. I mean, on this point, for decades, the high-tech industry has been able to look down their noses at the dirty mining industry.
Right, and they're funding all the think tanks and advocacy groups, right? So my prediction is in the next decade, you're going to see a fraction of the climate change activism that you saw in the last decade, because the money from high tech is going to dry up. They're not going to be funding this advocacy going forward at the same rate that they were in the past. And so you're just going to see it's just going to somehow miraculously not be such a big issue. And Greta Thunberg is your canary in that coal mine. She's already traded on, moved on from climate change to human
rights, Gaza,
so she'll chase whatever the next thing is, I imagine, wherever her little green frog hat will take her.
That's right. That's right.
But I think that again, this is good news that even these high-tech billionaires are malleable, and there is kind of a real-world test of things that work and don't work that then affect their interests that will get them to change their minds. So they're not generally willing to drive over the cliff. I
agree. This is good news. I think I'm inclined to have some fun at his expense, but sure, to a point, and all the while saying, "Thank goodness," So I agree. I think there's a silver lining here in that. Along with the sardonic comedy of it all, we can also say, well, but it's actually good, in the end. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah. So that's my dessert, and I hope this was a very satisfying lunch if you're on the East Coast, or breakfast if you're on the West Coast, for this week's installment of Lunch with EFI. Remember that we are doing this each Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 California time. live streamed on a variety of platforms where you may be watching this, or if you see it later recorded. So thank you for joining, and thanks to the great Matt Nielsen for our tech. He's our own tech wizard in helping put this all together.
Yeah, this is fun. Appreciate everyone coming, and we'll see everyone next week.
Great. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.